Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. This is I always say it's an amazing episode, but this is an amazing episode. We're talking about the emotional freedom techniques today, EFT, or it's also known as tapping. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I am going to tell you what the benefits are. And I think that it's excellent for those people that are deep thinkers and deep feelers, highly sensitive people. It's an amazing tool to help us when we get over-aroused, overstimulated, we're having strong emotional feelings. And some of the benefits are it helps to release stress. It calms down the nervous system. It changes brain waves. It can disrupt fear signals from the amygdala, whether we're having fear or worry. It actually can induce epigenetic changes, so it can turn on immune functions or it can turn off inflammation. It works pretty quickly. You can try it on everything and anything, and it's also great if you're having a troubling memory, either something in the present, you're having a stress, a worry, something about the future that's coming up, physical pain. And what I love is Alison talks about, it really is helpful when we have beliefs, and many of our core beliefs are formed before we're the age of 6. So if you were told you're too sensitive or you need to get thicker skin or you worry too much, you can use tapping to work on these core beliefs. Let me tell you a little bit about Alison. Alison Morris is a certified EFT practitioner who loves helping people understand how they respond to stress and how EFT or tapping can help them quickly and effectively release whatever has them stressed, whether a memory, a physical symptom, or a fear of the future. Alison is focused mostly on helping parents of children with serious emotional and behavioral challenges, many of whom are highly sensitive people, through her work at Full Potential Parenting. And now, on to the show. Hey, Alison, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I'm so glad you reached out to me. We did a online summit for Harmony at Home, and Koichi, who arranged it, connected us. And so I think this is going to be a really great topic for the listeners and a great tool to use to kind of help us when we're struggling.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to diving in with you today about this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. Let's start out with my typical question. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I think I have characteristics of an HSP, but I have not ever really identified as such, which I think is actually probably causes me more problems, because if I identified more with it, I think then I would look to certain things for more understanding and maybe even some other tools for some areas where I struggle.
Sure. And of course, my bias is if you're working with parents and kids and you have something that you can give them. I really have a strong feeling about labels and not liking labels, but the label of being highly sensitive, I've had so many people, and for myself, it was transformational to know, like, this is how I'm wired. There's nothing wrong with me. And to understand the strengths around it has just been really transformational. If you're a first-time listener and you don't know what a highly sensitive person is, or you're not sure, if you go to hsperson.com, there's a self-test you can take. If you suspect you're highly sensitive and you don't reach the cutoff, Dr. Elaine Aron, who researched and coined the trait highly sensitive, it's been around for a long time, she just did research and coined the trait, suggests to take the child version of the test and think back to when you were a kid. So, Alison, let me just go over the 4 core characteristics and see if they resonate with you. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
So Dr. Aron has 4 core characteristics that spell out the acronym DOES or DOES, and the D is for depth of processing, that we have a more active insula, we're deep thinkers, we process, we're more self-reflective. We often have that kind of internal observer of what we're saying and what we're doing and kind of that little narrator. Does that fit for you?
Yes, that definitely does.
And then the O is for overstimulation. And I've added over-arousal that we have. Well, actually, it's over-arousal. I've added overstimulation. Our nervous systems are finely tuned and we take in way more information than the non-HSP. So it's not uncommon for us to feel like a sponge that's totally saturated and we just can't take in any more information.
And that one, I'm a little iffy on that. I think it depends on other things going on. So that's a sort of a sometimes for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The E is for emotional responsiveness or empathy. We have more active mirror neurons. So we tend to have more feelings of empathy. We're moved very strongly by arts, nature, music, animals. We tend to not like to be startled. Some of us don't like to watch violent things. And we just tend to be more caring, feeling, having a sense of justice and equality for people.
And that one is the one that I resonate with most strongly, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I was just recognizing, just watching something on Amazon that I was once again like looking away during like an uncomfortable moment. I couldn't watch it, and that's been true for me since I was a kid. Like I can't look, and it's kind of funny. That one's a super, but that's just one, of course, aspect of that. But I just was recognizing it again very recently.
And the S is sensitive to subtleties. So again, we take in all kinds of information. We may be sensitive to changes in barometric pressure, to temperature. We may hear the sound of a ticking clock. A very small part of it is being sensitive to bright lights, loud noises, clothing, strong smells. But it's really, again, that noticing that we are aware of so many more things than other people are. And I'm not always super great at which part it goes under the DOES, but our brains light up in more areas than the non-HSP when we have interactions because we're just picking up on facial cues and body language and just so much more than the non-highly sensitive person.
Yeah, and that is an area that I think I recognize that in myself, but at the same time, I don't have a lot of real-time awareness of it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think too that because we come the way that we're wired, if we're not aware of these characteristics, we just kind of assume everybody's the same way. And I know for me that when I notice and remember details that others don't, or I'm very conscientious about putting things back where I got them, or in some ways I'm incredibly detail oriented. In other ways, you'd think that I had partially functioning brain because I'm just not tuned into certain things. But I find myself often surprised and sometimes judgmental that like, how come the other person isn't thinking along these same tracks? Because we just kind of assume that everybody processes and sees and understands the same way that we do.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. We're going to talk about EFT today. Can you tell the listeners what EFT is and how you got involved with it?
Yes. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And there is an S at the end of the techniques because it's not one single technique. It's also very informally referred to as tapping because it involves using your fingertips to tap on specific acupressure points on your head, your face, and your upper body. It's sometimes called emotional acupuncture without needles because, again, we're making use of acupuncture or acupressure points that have traditionally been used in acupuncture or acupressure. And those are points that lie along what are called meridians, which is an energy system that the Chinese identified thousands of years ago. And they're really kind of rivers of energy that flow through our body. Many of them start in our feet. They wind up. They're all named after specific organs. So there's a heart and a lung and a kidney and a liver and a spleen meridian and so on. And then many of them end up in our face and our head. I've actually now seen a picture of what they think is an actual meridian. So there are now devices that have been able to identify them. Although there have for a long time been instruments, you can pick one up on Amazon. I'm trying to think what the name of them is now. It's escaping me, where you can put them over your skin and you can identify acupressure points that are like beeps because there's like more electrical conductivity, I believe, at those specific points on your body. In any case, what EFT does is it does so many things. It is an enormously helpful stress release tool. It can help us calm our nervous systems. It can help change our brainwave states from being overactive to being more in like a light meditative state. It can disrupt fear signals from our amygdala in our brain so that we are not overtaken by fear or worry. Lately, they have discovered that it induces epigenetic changes in our gene expression, right? So it turns on lots of protective genes like really strong immune function, for instance, and it turns off genes that are associated with things like inflammation, which is one way why stress can translate then later into physical disease through that sort of inflammation pathway. So lots of really awesome studies out there now proving how effective EFT is. In fact, it has been compared favorably in terms of its effectiveness now to other what are called kind of gold standard therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or EMDR. But what's kind of neat about EFT is that it works more quickly. You can get the same effects, but with fewer sessions of EFT. So EFT, the tagline for EFT for many years has been try it on anything or try it on everything. And that's because it's an enormously flexible series of techniques that you can really use to apply to so many areas of your life. So whether it's a really troubling memory of something that happened in the past, whether it's a present moment stress or worry, whether it's a fear of the future, whether it's physical pain or discomfort, or even if it's a belief, which and that aspect of it is, I think, almost the most powerful and the most universally helpful, because it seems to have an ability to go into our subconscious brain and reprogram beliefs that we have often taken on and have held about both ourselves and about really the world in general for decades, often, because so much of what we pick up, we've learned before the age of about 6 or 7 years old. Obviously, we continue to learn, but a lot of those really foundational principles about sort of who I am or who am I, how does the world work, can adults be trusted, is the world safe, all those sorts of things, we tend to have a lot of those that were really ingrained in us at a very early age. And then they just sort of play out throughout the rest of our lives without necessarily us being consciously aware of them. That's a really long explanation.
No, I love that. It's really thorough. And what I was thinking is for the people that are highly sensitive, all it took was having a parent who didn't understand the trait of being a highly sensitive person. And I've given examples in the past that are a little on the harsh side, but it could be as much as a child worrying about a pet or a neighbor or a friend and a parent innocently saying, don't worry about it, they'll be fine. Thinking that that's the loving and reassuring thing to do. But when you have a child who's a deep feeler and a deep thinker, we need to have a parent that understands the depth of our concern and our fears and our worries. So I can really see how we have well-meaning, well-intentioned parents who just didn't understand what the trait was. And in their attempt to reassure us, it kind of shuts down that part of us that really feels and responds and worries and is concerned. And then we end up recreating that and telling ourselves those things. So this is where as I'm just listening to you, thinking that EFT or tapping can be really powerful to work on some of those core beliefs that we often don't even know that we have internalized.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, it could have been something that was much harsher, right? Somebody saying, oh, stop being so sensitive, or stop being such a sissy, or, you're just, you overreact to everything, right? Which might just be tossed off by a parent or a teacher or some other adult without any thought to how damaging that was for a little person to hear, right? Because when we're young, in particular, we are so self-centered and we tend to believe that everything is our fault too. And right, so everything is about us, especially if we're told something is about us, then it's sort of like double the impact, it seems. So yeah, we're so vulnerable in those early years to really forming just an awful lot of really untrue beliefs about ourselves and about our place in the world, how the world functions, about relationships, all sorts of things. And EFT can really help us unwind a lot of that and kind of go back in time and really neutralize that. And then we can decide what we want to believe instead.
Right. Even things like telling a child that they're shy or trying to force a child to say hello or to meet strangers or unfamiliar people, or with the holidays coming up, forcing a kid to hug Aunt Sally or Uncle Jim. And
Yes.
as
yes.
highly sensitive people, we really want to stand on the sidelines. Many of us, we want to observe, we want to take in the information. And when we're ready, we will go into a situation. And I can't tell you how many people have told me that because they're more reserved, they like to think things through, that they've gotten messages that how they show up in the world is not okay, or they feel like they're shy. And it's like, this is just how we're wired, and we need a little bit more time. And I don't think that I just heard something over this past weekend, and it sends chills up my spine when I hear it, that let children have time to warm up and approach whoever, whatever on their own time. And please don't ever, 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 ever label a kid as being shy.
Yeah. I mean, we hear these things and it's just like, it turns into a little computer program. And then we get into new situations and press the shy button. And we just run that program. Oh, I'm shy. I can't handle that. It goes both ways. It's both disempowering, and it can also be just a mischaracterization entirely. So there's all sorts of ways that can really mess us up. So what I love to say about tapping, one of the reasons that I love it so much is that there are really 4 A's that I like to talk about. And the first one is so big. It allows us to acknowledge how we're feeling. It gives us a big old permission slip to say, you know what, how you feel is how you feel. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. You get to just say, okay, you know what, this is anger. This is sadness. This is me feeling ashamed or embarrassed. Whatever is coming up for you, right? That's where you are. So that's the first A, is just the acknowledging. Then the second A is allowing. Then we allow ourselves to actually feel it. And this gets a little tricky because EFT is really focused on the negative. And the reason for that is because if we want to feel better, we need to address what is and not pretend it isn't there. The reason we often don't like to feel what we might call bad emotions, I'll put those in quotation marks, is it because it feels like they'll never go away. But our emotions in particular are not meant to stay with us. They're not meant to get stuffed down or repressed or ignored. We're supposed to feel them and then they move on. So we get to feel whatever we're feeling, not forever, but for a little while, just for a little while. And then the third A that I like to talk about is accepting. So there's an affirmation that's part of EFT, and I'm going to teach everybody how to tap here in a little bit. And the main affirmation is, I deeply and completely accept myself, which when you stop and think about it just on its own is a really beautiful statement. Very simple, it's very straightforward, and it is also a really difficult thing for most of us to do, right? We can trot off the phrase easily, although some people literally cannot get those words out of their mouth. So that's, right, a pretty extreme lack of acceptance. But if you can really kind of feel into what that's saying, it's like, you know what, you really are okay, no matter how you feel, no matter what you believe, no matter what you've been through, inherently, innately, you're okay. And then the fourth A that I talk about is awareness. So when we tap, often things kind of bubble up from our subconscious mind, and we become aware of what may be related or what may seem like unrelated memories or events or people. And yet somehow in our subconscious mind, they are related. It can sometimes give us a really interesting perspective, maybe a reframe about something, or it can lead us down a different path to healing. So then we can go say, oh my gosh, yeah, like I remember Aunt Sally used to wrap me in that big bear hug when she'd come over at Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever, or Thanksgiving. And I felt suffocated and like I wanted to scream and run away. That's why I've never enjoyed being hugged by anybody, right? You get these little aha moments. It's not always so clear cut, I'll just say that, but it often is. And those are really beautiful moments where you can follow the breadcrumbs, so to speak, and then you can tap on that early, very specific incident about something that happened to you, and then really kind of free yourself from the memory of it. So the memory doesn't go away, but it's almost like it turns from technicolor into black and white, which is one reason why it's really effective for people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, among other things.
I love that. I've used tapping throughout the years. I often forget. I just forget that it's a tool that I can use. But what I talk about on the podcast is the power of naming things and just being okay with where we're at. And often as highly sensitive people, we're very discriminating. So we're aware of the things that upset us or the judgments. And so much of what I talk about is creating room for that and just having it be okay. And so hearing you talk about the 4 A's, which I hadn't really heard before, it totally makes sense. And what I can say is that when I've been upset or frustrated about something, sometimes we kind of get so flooded that we don't even know what to do with it. And tapping is such a great way to talk about what it is that's going on that we don't like, have that level of acceptance, create room for allowing, and then it kind of moves us through it. Because I think so many of us, this has been my experience, that my automatic response often is like, it's not a big deal. Like, just kind of move on, get over it. We got so many of those messages, and there's so much power when we can take time and honor what's going on without getting overwhelmed, but having a really clear tool that kind of walks us through what's going on, and then to experience relief on the other end of it. It's incredibly empowering.
It is. And, it was designed to be a self-help tool. One of the issues with that is one that you mentioned, right? Which is you either forget to tap or you just don't do tapping on your own. So after many years of also not doing enough tapping myself, although I do tapping with clients and things, so I've got it that way. I wasn't doing enough tapping on my own and stuff. I finally got smart and got a tapping buddy or tapping partner myself. And so we swap sessions every single week. So it's sometimes nice to be part of a course or to work with a practitioner, right? So you actually know you're going to do it, because like so many self-help tools, it can be easy to sort of just forget about it. And of course, you only get the benefits from tapping when you do the tapping. A couple things that people often struggle with when they learn how to tap. Number one thing that people say is, I don't know what to say. I don't know what words to use. And it's funny, I've never had that problem with tapping. And maybe because I've always been like a really good student, and I learned lessons and I got my certification and, whatever. And so I follow the rules and I apply them. But often people get really stuck on what words to say. And I usually tell people to just, not worry about it. You just, whatever is coming up for you is what words you use. Because if you work with me or another practitioner, the words that we would use to lead you through a tapping session are your words. We're not making things up. We might suggest something or ask a question, but for the most part, we're going to be mirroring back exactly what you have just told us. So people don't need to get too hung up on that. But if that is in itself too much and that's preventing you from tapping, then don't use words, right? If as an HSP, you're already pretty keyed in to how you're feeling, the words are really just kind of used to focus what we're tapping on. But if your body's already tuned in, then don't use any words, right? If that's the only reason that you're not tapping, then just tap without it. There are tapping techniques, many that are used in a lot of cross-cultural situations, like in refugee camps or in countries where there are a lot of indigenous languages where no words are used. They might use music and people will tap to music that's culturally appropriate, but right. So I don't want to get people too hung up on, I don't know what to say. The other thing that often trips people up with tapping, and then we should go through an example so people really get a sense of what we're talking about here, is not being specific enough. So usually the more specific you can be about a particular incident, the better the results you will get. So for instance, we could just use that hugging example. right? And I don't really like it. Even though I don't like it when people really hug me, and then I deeply and completely accept myself. You would want to go back to a very specific memory that you have. And maybe it was just last night at a party. Even though it made me really uncomfortable when Bob hugged me when I came to his house for dinner last night, right? So you really want to zero in. And the other really cool thing about EFT, and this I think other folks will really like, is that you are also really tuning in to where you feel things in your body. So it is a true mind-body modality. So we're not just thinking intellectually about what might be bothering us. We are feeling into things that we're experiencing in the moment right now, right? So we're not thinking about how much it bothered us 20 years ago or last night. It's how much is this affecting me right now in the present moment? And is it making my stomach squirm? Are my shoulders tight? Am I clenching my jaw? Do I have a fuzzy feeling in my head? Whatever it is, you're noticing that. And then you can also tap on those specific physical symptoms as well. Sorry, that was a whole lot of information there, but I'd say those are the main reasons that people struggle with tapping. They don't know what words to use. They're too broad or general in their approach. And then that last one where they fail to really recognize what's going on somatically within their body. They're just sort of thinking about things as an intellectual exercise as opposed to a more emotional kind of approach. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And my experiences for the HSPs that I work with, especially in the online HSP courses that we're running, is we do a how the heck are you check-in at the beginning of each group, because for many of us that weren't allowed to express feelings, we've learned to be really intellectual and in our heads. And so making that connection back into our body where it feels safe to do a body scan and to see what's going on, who's showing up, what am I feeling, can really feel new and scary. And so having to learn some of those tools can really be an adjustment if that's what your experience has been, where for many other people that they were very much in their feelings and really need to learn how to get a little bit more out of their feelings and in a little bit more intellectual.
And you can tap on that, right? So that's the other lovely thing about tapping. And I get excited about this, right? You can adjust your lens, your focus. So you can get meta on stuff, and then you can get really specific on stuff. So you can tap on, even though I haven't allowed myself to feel what I'm feeling for years, and I'm a little worried about what that might be like if I start to feel again. You can craft the most specific to you and your set of circumstances kind of setup phrase as you want. That is the beauty of it. If it's, even though people have been telling me to not be so sensitive for years, and I don't know. I mean, you can just come up with whatever makes sense for you, but you start where you are. And if that's, I just am so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start, then that's okay too. You can start there, even though I'm so overwhelmed and I can't even identify what I'm feeling, because it's just such a big mess, right? You don't have to have a really beautiful or elegant sounding kind of way that you express yourself. You just get to be you. And if that involves getting really angry and swearing a lot, that's okay too, right? You just get to be where you are and feel what you're feeling very authentically, very vulnerably. This is why mostly people want to tap privately, but on really personal things. Tapping in the shower is great. I actually like to tap in the car.
I've done that too in the car. Only my sunglasses get in the way with the meridian on the side of my eye, so I've had to figure out how to adjust that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be a little careful, right? Maybe not to tackle something too big, so that you don't want to get too emotional while you're driving, so you're not paying attention. But sometimes I tap in the car without really focusing on anything and just see what happens, because what happens when you tap is that you're kind of just releasing energy. It's really like the emotions that have been stuck inside of you are allowed to come out. So often people sigh. I yawn a lot. Crying is not uncommon when people tap because they're getting in touch with some big emotions. So I don't think that's ever a problem. And, so there's other sort of forms of release that happen. Often people's faces get brighter when they're tapping. Their shoulders start to relax and sink back down. They sit up taller. I mean, it's amazing to watch sometimes the physical transformations that people can go through. It's like a literal burden has been lifted from people's shoulders, and they're just able to move through the world with more ease and more flow and more comfort.
And I think it's such a beautiful way for us to be present for ourselves that so many of the people that I work with, what I hear is they really felt like nobody got them. Nobody was there for them. They didn't learn to embrace how they're wired. And so they feel like how they show up in the world is wrong. They feel like misfits. And then when feelings come up, they usually hate the traits of being sensitive, or they don't have a great appreciation for them. And they just want to get rid of them. And tapping is such a beautiful way to really be present for ourselves, to hear ourselves, to honor ourselves, and to have a very clear way to walk through the things that we're challenged with and to come through it to the other side of it where we really do love and accept ourselves exactly how we are. And we get some relief from that over arousal and overstimulation. I hadn't really ever thought about it in these terms until we're talking about it, kind of integrating it as I'm listening. And it's incredibly powerful. So how about if we do a little bit of tapping?
Yes, that would be lovely. So another thing that we do with tapping is we try to test it always to see how we're doing, right? Is it working for us? So in fact, should we do some tapping on this sort of, I'm not liking being so sensitive. I hate being so sensitive. I hate feeling like a misfit because I'm so sensitive, right? All that kind of stuff. Why don't we do some tapping around that? And
okay.
What I'd love to do is invite you and everybody else listening to really kind of tune into that and literally get in touch with yourself about where you're feeling about that right now. And then give yourself a rating on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you're fine with it and 10 is you're just, right? It's almost intolerable how upset you are about this particular thing.
So for this would be how uncomfortable am I with my sensitivity? So a 10 would be I really hate the fact that I'm sensitive, and a 0 would be like, it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Right. I love it. Yeah, it's great. I'm embracing it. Exactly. And usually I don't know, I mean, there's different rules of thumb about this, but you don't usually want to tackle things that you're too intense about on your own. So, somewhere in the maybe 4 to 6 range. There are exceptions to that, of course, right? But so hopefully people aren't too far up on that scale. But if so, we'll see if we can take them down a few notches. And I want you to also notice where you feel that in your body. Is there a particular place where you're feeling that discomfort and it really might be hate, that hatred of your sensitivity? Does that live somewhere in your body? And I don't know if there's a place that you're noticing, Patricia, for you.
I am. It's so funny because I tend to not be in my body until I breathe, check in. I noticed my neck was really, really tight. My neck and shoulders are really tight. And then the pit of my stomach, I just kind of get a knot right there. So I thought, that's really interesting.
Okay. All right. So we'll use those. Okay. I'm just making a few notes here so I remember. Excellent. Okay. So now what we're going to do, and I'll describe all of this. You're going to take one hand, fingers on one hand, it does not matter which hand you use, and you're going to use 4 fingers and you're going to tap on what's called the side of the hand of the other hand. Often this is still referred to as the karate chop point, so you'll see that as well. But it's that little fleshy part between your wrist and the base of your little finger. And you're just going to tap, literally tap. And then you're going to say what's called a setup phrase 3 times. And the setup phrase usually goes like this: even though and then you state your problem. And then you have an affirmation: I deeply and completely accept myself. So in this case, you can tap along and just repeat after me: even though I really am not enjoying this sensitivity. And that you can just repeat right after me.
Oh, are you wanting me to repeat after you?
Yep. Yeah. Why don't you just mirror me? That way people can follow along.
There goes my taking notes. We're ruining my sense of order here. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. So even though I really hate being so sensitive.
Even though I really hate being so sensitive.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Even though I have felt like a misfit for years.
Even though I have felt like a misfit for years.
Because I am so sensitive.
Because I am so sensitive.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Even though I really wish sometimes that my sensitivity would just go away.
Even though I sometimes wish that my sensitivity would just go away.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Okay, so now we're going to take fingers, again, either hand. We're going to go right to the very top of the head, like where a puppet would come from, a string would come out from the top of a puppet's head, and just tap lightly while we say what's called a reminder phrase. I hate being so sensitive.
I hate being so sensitive.
All right, we go to the eyebrow point, which is the edge of the eyebrow closest to your nose. Again, you can use either hand or both hands, but just for now, let's just use one hand. Just tap lightly with 2 or 3 fingers. I hate being so sensitive.
I hate being so sensitive.
Then we follow to the outside of the eye, just on that bone, gently, don't poke yourself in the eye. I'm tired of being such a misfit.
I'm tired of being such a misfit.
Then follow that bone underneath your eye, just an inch or 2 below. I really hate being so sensitive.
I really hate being so sensitive.
And we go to it's called under the nose, that little indentation between your nose and your upper lip. I hate being so sensitive.
I hate being so sensitive.
The chin point, which is above the chin and below the lower lip, and that little indentation. I am so tired of being so sensitive.
I am so tired of being so sensitive.
And then we go to the collarbone point. So if you find your collarbone, your clavicle, and trace it sort of to the middle point where the two of them kind of almost come together, drop down an inch and then go to one side about 2 inches, and you'll find a kind of a notch, like an indentation in there. And that is technically the collarbone point. What I like to do, though, just to keep it a little bit simpler, is to take all 5 fingers and go all the way across your chest below your collarbone. That way you make sure you get that point. I'm so tired of being so sensitive.
I'm so tired of being so sensitive.
And then finally, we're going to do the underarm point. This one looks a little weird. It's about 4 inches below your armpit, about where a bra strap would cross. You can curl one hand arm up on one side to reach it, or you can reach across your chest to tap under your arm on the other side of your body, if that makes sense. I hate being so sensitive.
I hate being so sensitive.
Okay, so that's one round of tapping. So let's go back through now a little bit more quickly now that we know where all the points are. We'll do one more round and then I'll check in with you and we'll see how we're doing. So top of the head. I feel it as a knot in my stomach.
I feel it. There's a knot in my stomach.
Eyebrow point. My neck and shoulders are really tight.
My neck and shoulders are really tight.
Side of the eye. It's where I hate my sensitivity.
It's where I hate my sensitivity.
Under the eye. I'm so tired of being so sensitive.
I'm so tired of being so sensitive.
Under the nose. I'm tired of being a misfit because of my sensitivity.
I'm tired of being a misfit because of my sensitivity.
Chin point. I feel it as a knot in my stomach.
I feel it as a knot in my stomach.
Collarbone. And this tightness in my neck and shoulders.
And this tightness in my neck and shoulders.
Underarm point. I hate being so sensitive.
I hate being so sensitive.
All right, so let's stop there and just take a deep breath and let that out. Whew. And let me just check in with you and see if you notice any shifts or changes.
Yeah, I feel more relaxed.
I didn't check with you on if you had a rating when we started. I don't know where you were, but would you say you've maybe gone down a point or 2?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm pretty accepting of my sensitivity, but I would say it probably has gone down a point or 2.
Okay, and how's that knot in your stomach?
It's still there, but it's better.
Okay. If I had not been taking the time to explain where the points are, going through that 2 rounds of tapping would have taken us about 40 seconds. So that's 40 seconds to feel a fair bit amount better, which I just find remarkable. That's a fairly consistent outcome. Now, are you 100% better? Is this like gone for good? Probably not, right? But that's okay because you've always got it available and you can do more tapping. And we could keep tapping on this particular issue. Now, I just want to point out a couple things, especially when you're starting to tap. You don't need to change what you say at every point, right? You could just say, I hate my sensitivity, or I hate being sensitive, or you could just say this sensitivity or this anger at my sensitivity. Whatever the case is, you could just say that over and over and over again as you're tapping through all the points. Totally fine. So I just want to give people permission to keep it simple, certainly when they're starting out. Was there another point? I don't remember now. If I had another point, it's gone. And I will say though, also it's helpful to have some water nearby and just stay hydrated when you're tapping. Sometimes we don't feel better immediately after we've done tapping, and it takes a little while for kind of things to catch up. And then you'll notice a little while later that you're feeling a whole lot better. Maybe it's an hour later, who knows? But of course, usually what people are looking for is to feel better pretty much right away. Often that is available to us through tapping. So that is a pretty cool just aspect of it, that it gives you such immediate relief.
Yeah, definitely. And so if somebody were doing this on their own, would they just continue to repeat phrases along the lines of what we've been saying?
Yes. So then if you stop and you say, okay, maybe you were at a 6 and now you've done a couple rounds and now you're at a 4. So, right, a 4 is not nothing. Then you really kind of have a choice. You can pause and you can check to see whether maybe something shifted. So sometimes our emotion shifts, but we're not aware of it. Maybe we're not hating our sensitivity anymore. Maybe we're feeling anger at the people who made us feel bad for being sensitive, right? So it's like it's shifted, either a target or maybe the emotion itself is shifted. And now we're not feeling anger or hatred. Now maybe we're feeling really sad about ourselves and about how often we were made to feel bad about who we are. And sometimes people think EFT isn't working because they haven't picked up on those shifts. They just know they're kind of still feeling bad about being sensitive in general, right? To use this example. So I just want to kind of point that out. Because sometimes people, they think nothing's happened, but in fact, a lot's happened. It's just there's more, of the proverbial layers to the onion. So that sometimes goes on as well. So I don't know, we could keep tapping on something there, or we could try a sort of a different kind of tapping.
Let's try a different type of tapping. I love to give the listeners as many tools as possible. And then I have to say, I'm kind of struggling with something, Alison. So can I be totally transparent with you?
Yes, absolutely.
With the protocol that I learned with tapping that I've used is then I go into a round of, and it kind of automatically brings me into it about what's working. And I kind of go into supportive corrective statements. And so it sounds like the tapping that you don't do that. Is that correct?
Okay, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The sort of original or basic recipe of tapping is to stay with the negative. And it generally is described as being, a way to kind of clean the wound out before it can heal, right? So you're not just going to put a Band-Aid on something before you've cleaned it out. But it often can feel really like a bummer to people to just constantly be focusing on the negative. Yes, it's definitely possible to do tapping on kind of reframing or just sort of feeling better about things or kind of shifting gears. But generally speaking, you don't want to shift gears too soon, or it's not really very helpful. If you're not down to a 1 or a 2, maybe, and these are imprecise ratings, so people don't need to spend a lot of time, trying to get very precise on where they fall on this rating scale. But if you're not down to about a 1 or a 2, I'd say it's too soon to shift to some more positive thinking. But definitely there are all sorts of varieties of ways to try to do a little bit of reframing just to kind of, shift your perspective and even leave with some affirmations where you're just tapping on some kind of nicer things to believe about yourself for a full round of tapping. Does that help?
It does. And, I always feel like I want to be respectful of guests and not counter what you're saying, but just because I learned it a different way. And what my experience has been is when I allow full expression of whatever's going on of the negative aspect, that it's kind of like I kind of wear that part out, that because that part of me gets heard and seen enough, that then it's like, okay, so my sensitivity isn't so bad. I love my feelings. I love expressing myself, that it naturally kind of turns into that. And because that's what I'm accustomed to, that's kind of what I'm expecting to end on.
Right. No. And then that sounds like that's lovely because you have actually kind of gone through a bit of an internal transformation.
Yeah.
And so that you're not sort of shifting gears too soon, so to speak. So there's another kind of tapping too that, well, we won't go into that I think today, but it's called choices tapping, where you really can specify a particular statement about what you want, how you want to believe, how you want to feel about yourself, how you want to be in the world, whatever. And then that you go through some tapping specifically on that. That is really powerful. In fact, the woman who came up with that technique just died earlier this week. Her name was Patricia Carrington. And she did a lot of wonderful work, kind of moving EFT into some different areas. I will just say this about EFT as well. So the man who kind of developed EFT, a guy named Gary Craig, he basically gave EFT to the world. He now has a version of EFT that he has trademarked or copyrighted, I guess. But there's a lot of versions of EFT out there, and sometimes they're called different things. There are certification programs, but there are different ones, right? Because there was no centralized main school of EFT. So I just want to caution people that you do have to be a little bit discerning about who, if you choose to work with somebody, about who you're going to work with, and maybe see where they were. Are they certified? Some people just learn online, which is not to say that people who aren't certified may not have a lot of skill at it, but just be a little bit cautious in not maybe forming all your opinions or about maybe just watching some YouTube videos, say, as that being your whole exposure to sort of how to tap.
Sure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to your YouTube channel. So I know it can be difficult to understand how to tap if you're a visual person. If I can, I have a couple books on tapping, and if I can find a good picture that shows where the meridians are for tapping, I will see if I can figure out how to put that in the show notes or put a link to it. But I will put a link in the show notes. I can supply one for you as well. I have a little perfect
diagram that shows people where to tap as well.
Perfect. So I'll put a link for that in the show notes or however I do that. And then if you go to unapologeticallysensitive.com, and then if you go to my website, you'll click on the podcast link, and then you can find Alison's episode there, and we'll have a link to her YouTube channel so that you can also watch what the tapping looks like, because it's incredibly powerful. And I think especially for the highly sensitive person, it's so honoring, and it really teaches us how to have a voice for ourselves and to be present for ourselves, because many of us that struggle just didn't learn how to do that.
So here's another way too that sometimes you can adapt tapping, right? So the main affirmation, the standard one, is I deeply and completely accept myself. But it is also perfectly fine, if it makes more sense to you, to shift that to something that resonates more for you. So if you wanted to instead say, I honor myself in the way I feel. I honor my sensitivity and the gifts that it's brought to my life. I choose to believe that sensitivity is a superpower. There's so many different ways that you can adapt it to your particular situation. So I just want to throw that out there as well. Yeah, no, that's fine. So I'm trying to think I don't know how much time we have left.
We're kind of running close to being out of time. Okay. After I said, let's do it, and looked at time, I thought, there just isn't enough time for this. If we're getting ready to wrap up, what are some things that you would want the listeners to know before we end today?
Oh, wow. I really, I guess, hope that folks will take away that how they are is fine, is okay, is completely acceptable. that you talk about this with folks all the time, right? That it is their strength, it is their superpower. They were created this way for a reason. And my view is always that, it's the world that it just doesn't honor who we are, but it needs to become more flexible to permit us to express ourselves in the world. And so I really do hope that people could use tapping to help them feel more honored, safer, maybe too, right? Because partially this is just about not feeling safe to be who you are, right? That you're going to get shut down, you're going to get ridiculed. And to have that sort of inner, and to be able to kind of build up your inner strength, your inner conviction, you're okay, you are the way you are, and the rest of the world kind of needs to get on board.
I love it.
Yeah.
Alison, you have an entire other world that we didn't talk about. So if you're loving hearing Alison and her work is resonating, Alison, why don't you tell the listeners about the other part of your world that we really didn't talk about today? So if they're interested, they can get more information or work with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I do work through full potential parenting, and I have mostly used tapping to support parents and mostly mothers of children with serious emotional and behavioral challenges, some of whom are also HSPs, and really helping parents understand and make friends with their emotions that are triggered based on their children's behaviors. Because it can be very triggering, right? Parenting brings out all our own stuff that we have unresolved. And yet, the children who have these big emotions need their parents, most of all, to be safe ports in the storm. And so when we're triggered and we're out of sorts and we're flying off the handle and losing our temper, we can't be the co-regulatory figure that our children really need us to be, so that they can calm down, so that they can get regulated. So I really try to help parents understand what's going on with their kids and what's going on with them. And then I use tapping a lot to help parents work through their triggers, become friends with their emotions, so that, because we get scared of our emotions, right? They're big and they can feel they do feel overwhelming and sometimes really scary. And it's not fun to be scared of your child, and it's not fun to be scared of your own hatred or anger, right? And then we can feel ashamed that we have those emotions too, right? How could I have that kind of feeling about my own child? So then we turn the judgment on ourselves, and, it's just a big whole storm of yuck. That's what I work on a lot with parents, is to try to help them manage their own emotional state better, so that they can then be present and hold space for their children who really, really need them to be there.
And many of us didn't get that. I mean, I've shared in previous episodes that I've had my share of very poor parenting moments. I wasn't allowed to have tantrums. I had a very emotionally reactive child, and he'd have a tantrum, and I felt entitled to have a tantrum, and I didn't feel any better. And eventually I learned how to stay calm and to model to him what I hadn't been able to do. But we're going to parent imperfectly. And so when we have tools and resources, it's just great to be able to reach out and use them.
Yes. And I know we need to wrap up. I want to say too, though, that tapping can also be used as a really powerful forgiveness practice. Mm-hmm. So we can also use it for that, to really give ourselves some grace and try to help us feel okay about even how we've been in our worst moments.
Sure. Alison, where can people find you? Because I know often I listen to podcasts while I'm driving and I never go to the show notes. So where can people find you if they're interested in getting more information about you?
Sure. I'm at full-potential-parenting.com is my website. And then on Facebook, it's just Full Potential Parenting. So that's a lot easier.
Terrific. And I will put all of this in the show notes, and then we'll also have a picture of where you tap, and I'll have Alison's YouTube channel. So thank you so much for being here today. I really hope that each and every one of you is open to at least trying this. It's an incredibly powerful tool. So, I try and pick guests that I think are really going to benefit you. And this is really a amazing way to honor what goes on for us and to move through some difficult, intense feelings.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I do hope people do explore tapping because it's a powerful, powerful tool that really should be taught to every child and every parent and every person.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you, Alison. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really do think that tapping can be incredibly powerful, and I know it was difficult because this is an audio format. So when Alison and I finished recording, Alison agreed to do a Facebook Live with me after this airs. So if you are a member of the closed Facebook group called Unapologetically Sensitive, you can look it up on Facebook if you want to join. We will post in the group and schedule to do a Facebook Live and do a couple rounds of different types of tapping live for you. And then we'll keep that video in the group so you can get a chance to see what it looks like. And we will tap on things that are specific to being highly sensitive. If you are in or near San Diego on Saturday, March 7th, please come to our local meetup and help me celebrate 100,000 downloads. This has been such an amazing journey. We do our meetup on the first Saturday of every month at Morley Field. This month, we're meeting from 11 until 1 p.m. We're going to do a potluck. I've included a link in the show notes so that you can RSVP and sign up to bring something. Even if you can just stop by to say hello, I would love to have you there. From 11 to 12, we're going to just do an informal chat. And then at noon, we'll bring out the food. And if you've got lawn games, we're going to play some lawn games, just a really low-key way to hang out. I would love to see you, and I would love to have people here to celebrate my reaching 100,000 downloads, which is just amazing. If you're interested in doing some tapping, it's something that I've done for many years, so I'm happy to work with you if you want to do a practice round of tapping, you want to schedule a session with me. All of the work that I do is online. I can work with people anywhere in the world. It's a great way to work from the comfort of your home or your office, in your PJs, with a cup of coffee or tea, a pet close by. To get information on how to contact me, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. I love getting emails and hearing from you. If you've used tapping and it's effective, I'd love to hear about that too. Feel free to shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.